everyone. Welcome aboard to the Roald Dahl Retrospective, where we take a look at all the adaptations based off of Roald Dahl shorts and books. I am Patricia.
And my name is Arun.
So last time we talked about the 1996 live-action film Matilda, the box office flop that turned into a major phenomenon. So today we're going to be talking about the overall mixed 2005 film Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which was based off of a 1964 novel of the same name.
And just before we actually begin, to anyone who thinks that the audio quality on my side of things is not very good right now, I've not got things set up on casual chats set up on my studio session at the minute. So right now I'm just using my phone. So basically I'm just literally just calling in to Patricia over in Alabama.
Yeah. So this movie is going to be pretty interesting because there are a lot of people who either love this film or hate this film. There is literally no in between.
I think one of the great things, though, about this movie is that it's pretty much done by Tim Burton. It stars Johnny Depp, and it also gives us a very innocent play in Charlie Bucket as well, which I would just say that I guarantee you, Roald Dahl, if he was around today, would tick all these boxes that we currently have right now. And dare I say, maybe he probably would have enjoyed Charlie and the Chocolate Factory more than he would have enjoyed Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with Gene Wilder.
Oh yeah, so we will discuss about that and much more. So let's get started. Here we go. As previously mentioned in the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory episode of the Roald Dahl Retrospective, it was considered to be a flop when it first came out in 1971. It only made $4.5 million out of a $3 million budget. And critics didn't really care for it at the time. They said that the music was instantly forgettable. But when the movie was released on VHS and when there was released multiple times on TV airings, it became a major classic. Even still to this day, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is referenced in pretty much everything. Commercials, musicals. We went over to an arcade place where they even have a Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory game where they push like a little coin so you can be able to like see if you can, play some more arcade games and stuff like that. Funko figurines, toys, costumes. Like during that time, it was considered to be a classic. But as mentioned before, Roald Dahl hated this adaptation, like downright despised it. So it's no surprise that around 1991 was the beginning of the long, tumultuous attempt of trying to do a new adaptation of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that the Dahl family would be very happy with. And oh man, I really highly recommend that you look up some of this the stuff that the people that were going to be involved in this movie, like everybody from like Gary Ross, Martin Scorsese, Tommy Shadyac would have been directors. People such as Bill Murray, Nicolas Cage, Jim Carrey, Adam Sandler, Will Smith were called to be Willy Wonka. I mean, it is unbelievable of what we almost could have had.
Yeah, and here's the thing about this though is that you keep in mind one of the people that we mentioned in there was Will Smith, and as we all know, he has a notorious reputation of turning down some big roles. Like he had the opportunity to become Neo in The Matrix, and he had the opportunity to basically do other big roles as well, which he turned down, and then they would later on become successes without him. So it makes me wonder, like, would have Will Smith as Willy Wonka have been the success that Will Smith was looking for? I don't think so. So maybe it was a good thing that they decided to stay away from Will Smith in this regard. And and whatever people say about him being the genie in Aladdin, let me just tell you, it's critically, it's not as successful as the original Aladdin movie.
Yeah, well, anyways, it all started with Tim Burton. So Tim Burton was pitching his idea of doing the adaptation of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory to Lissy Dahl and the Dahl family because he absolutely loved the book as a kid. He hated Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And they felt that he did a really good job in producing James and the Giant Peach, which we did talk about before. And so Tim Burton got his usual people. He got Johnny Depp as Willy Wonka, and he got many of the other people who were featured in a lot of his movies around the late 90s and 2000s. Like his wife at the time, Helena Botham Carter, was in it. Missy Pyle, who had previously was in Big Fish. Deep Roy, who was in the 2001 Planet of the Apes movies and Big Fish, was in it. Same thing with Christopher Lee. He was also in another Tim Burton movie about the Headless Horseman. So there's that. So once again, very similar to pretty much a lot of his movies. So, he brought Danny Elfman to do the music. John August wrote the screenplay, and he also did the screenplay for Big Fish as well. And this movie was supposed to be in line with the original book because he absolutely loved the book, but he had also at the same time wanted to put in his creative liberties of his presentation and his art design. When the movie came out in 2005, it was a massive hit. It made over $475 million. Now, I have the numbers right here for every single Roald Dahl movie that has ever been released theatrically. I have 36 Hours, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, The Witches, Four Rooms, James and the Giant Peach, and Matilda. Altogether, their box office numbers are a total of $86.5 million. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory has eaten that for lunch. And I mean, not even that, and as an appetizer. To this day, no other Roald Dahl adaptation has made this amount of money. Not even close.
Is that even rounded up to inflation as well?
Even with inflation, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory would still be the juggernaut out of everything else. Everything else is just minuscule compared to the amount of money that this movie has made. And this movie came out 15 years ago.
Wow. It goes back to the genius of Tim Burton. And actually, before we even get into Tim Burton, I would like to propose a interesting debate. What do you think, Patricia, of the whole kind of like the director ragtag, if you will? So, Quentin Tarantino, you'll notice that in some of his movies, he'll have the same actors and actresses that constantly appear in his movies. And then you kind of have the same thing with Tim Burton. He always seems to be a go-to guy with certain people that he wants to work with. Yeah. What do you think of that in regards to like a director putting on multiple productions with the same people involved?
I mean, it is true that sometimes it could be a little tiring, and maybe some of the actors that would be cast in as the movie may not even fit the role. We'll talk about that later. But I mean, personally, if they are really good with the role, I mean, I don't mind it too much, just as much as, depending on what the movie is and all that kind of stuff. Wes Anderson is a very similar case in which he casts the same actors in his movies. We'll talk about that next month with Fantastic Mr. Fox. But yeah, I mean, at some points I do get a little bit tired of it, but it's not like a major buzzkill for me personally, because, I really enjoy a lot of Tim Burton's movies. I mean, some of the movies that he's done are some of my favorites, like Nightmare Before Christmas, Ed Wood, Beetlejuice, Batman, Edward Scissorhands, pretty much all those movies I enjoy immensely. And yeah, I mean, even with using the same, composer, Danny Elfman, you can definitely tell when a song is done by Danny Elfman. As mentioned with James and the Giant Peach, you can definitely tell if a song is done by Randy Newman. So sure, I mean, I can understand people's complaints, but personally for me, unless it's justified, I don't really mind it.
Cool. I mean, also, I don't mind it too. I just think that sometimes when, a recurrent keeps coming up like over and over and over and over again, obviously then it can be a little bit problematic. I like the idea that you have your go-to people, but then obviously you also reach out to the new as well, and also reach out to other people as well to like put your production into it. Because let's face it, you can't keep putting the same lead in, time and time again, because obviously then it starts kind of like the role, the role starts to kind of morph into one another eventually, and so until they kind of like lose their uniqueness. So.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I guess with that out of the way, let's get started. So I know a lot of people are going to be comparing this to the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie because it's based off of a book, and there was a previous adaptation that a lot of people hold very fondly of. Then when you're going to look into this movie, especially with Tim Burton, then yeah, I mean, people are going to be pointing out various things. But I just want to let you know that out of all the adaptations of Roald Dahl that we've seen, this is probably the most authentic to the book.
Well, if you remember, Patricia, in the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Charlie Bucket's dad was not around. So, I mean, obviously he's in this movie. He's casted, and he's obviously also casted pretty much to the T, pretty much in this movie. Like, he was the worker in a toothpaste factory until the toothpaste factory closed down, and then all of a sudden he had to go to shovel snow in the streets and things like that. So I mean, in regards to the faithfulness to the original source material, I would say that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory does that probably 100 times better more than Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory did. I was on that as well. Like if you remember, I mean, like I was on that as well. Like, I don't know if I was paying that much attention to the movie, but wasn't there not that much corporate advertising in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory compared to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which, if you remember, featured a machine trying to figure out what where the golden tickets were, which was produced by Siemens. And then, if you remember, there was also on the electronics store there was actually some Philips Philips hi-fi players, I think, also being advertised on in one of the stores when Charlie Bucket's running down the street. So, I mean, dare I say, I think the more modern version is somehow less corporate than the 1970s Gene Wilder version.
Okay, well, I mean, admittedly, there aren't any like noticeable advertisements of companies that we personally know of, but it's updated and it's modernized. And I think that, maybe because it was done by a huge studio, then maybe they didn't really need a lot of those like advertisements to be put all over the screen to say like, okay, we're going to advertise your stuff as long as we get like a cut of the money. I mean, it was done by Warner Brothers. So, with Warner Brothers, they had a huge budget to work with. And with Tim Burton, he was able to stride in producing a movie that was just as faithful to the book as anything. So, it starts off very differently from Willy Wonka, as you probably know. With Willy Wonka, you see a real, real chocolate being made into like chocolate bars and all that kind of stuff. And in this movie, it's very like mechanical, like it's kind of like sterile and cold, and the way that the chocolate is made, and then the wrapping of the candy bars, and then being put over into like boxes being shipped all over the world, and we don't get to see who the drivers are. It's really mysterious, and it kind of like puts an edge. It's like, oh man, what's gonna? I mean, we for us, we already know what's going on. This is Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. The Oompa Loompas are in the trucks and they're delivering all these chocolates from all over the world. So it's being done in secret. But, for people who weren't familiar with it, it's like, oh, wow, what's going on here?
Yeah, and that's the only thing that kind of irks me a little bit, because, I mean, we only assume they're Oompa Loompas driving the trucks. I mean, like, we don't actually know what's going on in there. And actually, on top of that as well, like, for all they could just be normal delivery drivers. I mean,
which kind of like contradicts something that we're going to be bringing up in just a moment. So,
well, they could be outsourced. I mean, keep this in mind. Like, they don't actually not work actually for the factory. They basically just could be just random drivers who basically just you get that kind of stuff going on within factories. Where they just hire drivers just to drive trucks.
I personally don't agree, but I can see where you're coming from. Anyway, so we cut into the Bucket family, and the house looks so in line with something that you see in a Tim Burton movie, really slanted, old, falling apart. I think it fits perfectly with the situation that we have with the Bucket family, in which they're really poor. We have the usual gang of people. We have Charlie's parents, where the dad is alive and he works in the toothpaste factory, just like in the book. And we have, Grandpa George, Grandma Georgina, Grandpa Joe, and Grandma Josephine in their beds while the mom is making the cabbage soup which they can only eat and they can only afford. We have Charlie like building like some sort of huge collage of, you know, Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and then his dad comes along and he starts making the little he starts bringing in like the toothpaste you know, tabs that wasn't able to fit correctly, and then we have like a narrator, which is kind of like similar to what we had with like the previous movies, in which they have a narrator kind of like telling bits and pieces of the story. And except
funnily
here,
enough, the narrator actually is the guy who actually plays all the Oompa Loompas in the movie. So,
that's right, yeah, it's Deep Roy, which actually makes a lot more sense that one of the Oompa Loompas is telling the story, as opposed to like Danny DeVito, who is not only playing as the narrator but also the father, which is kind of weird of seeing, you know, hearing Danny DeVito as like a really nice guy as a narrator and then being a mean father, which I mean, this right here with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory makes a lot more sense. It's like, oh, you know, obviously one of the Oompa Loompas would know the story of Charlie because of something that would happen later on. But anyway, so he's building up this big collage, with, you know, made out of like broken or misshapen toothpaste caps. And then Grandpa Joe tells him the story about Willy Wonka and about how he used to work in the factory, and that corporate, you know, there was like a whole bunch of competitions involving with like, you know, they want to know about the secrets of Willy Wonka's candy. And so, you know, some people who used to work at the factory actually snuck in and stole his secret ingredients. And so various companies such as Slugworth were able to make similar candies to Willy Wonka. And that's when he decided to fire everybody from his chocolate factory and shut the place down for a long time until it opened up recently.
yeah, it's just like in regards to that. I mean, I was looking as well, like, you know, the grandparents. Haven't you noticed that in this version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, every single grandparent seems to have more personality than the other ones did? You know,
I
like
mean,
if
yeah,
you
they
think,
have more I'm sorry, I'm just gonna flat out and say this, but I mean, yes, we all, I mean, you know, Jack Albertson as Grandpa Joe was very lovable and he was, you know, very supportive of Charlie, but all the other grandparents were nothing. They were just there and didn't contribute anything in the plot. I really enjoyed the grandparents in this incarnation, especially Grandpa George, who is just a firecracker. He made me laugh every time that he said some sort of obscene word. Although that's, you know, admittedly, you know, Grandma Georgina with her you know, being like kind of senile at times, it could be a little uncomfortable, but you know,
I
she's
don't know. I thought it was adorable. Like it's you know, like she always tries to look on like on the brighter side of things, and she isn't really too aware of like the situation that she finds herself in. You know,
okay, that's
like I mean, it's just I mean, you can always, I mean, that's usually that's played for comedy, obviously. You know, when you see past that, like it's nice to see that even in her you know, inability to kind of recognize the scenario, she can still like try and keep Charlie Bucket in high spirits. You know. So like
that is true, yeah.
that in itself is a nice trait. So I mean, this is the thing. Like, you know, Grandpa, the only grandparent in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory which really had any type of development or any type of contribution to the movie was Grandpa Joe. Obviously, because obviously he's the guy who goes in with his grandson to obviously go around the chocolate factory. Obviously, he's the main thing. But I'm really glad some thought and attention did go into the other grandparents to say, oh, hey, these three other grandparents are in this movie, so let's give them something to do. And that's what they did. And so I'm really
Exactly.
glad they did that.
And you know what? Thank you for that, because you know, I mean, if that were the case in which you weren't going to do anything with them, you might as well just remove them from the film and nothing would have changed, because Grandpa Joe is a major character in this movie and the book alongside with Charlie. So yeah, I'm really glad that they were able to put some personality into these characters.
When you
And
really think about it, like you really do question like the way that they did Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And think about it, like, you know, you took out the dad who had like, you know, a role to kind of play in the plight of Charlie Bucket in the story. You took him out of the Gene Wilder movie, but you kept the grandparents and did nothing with them.
yeah, that's
When you really think about it, you might as well just have like, oh hey, well, you know, here's Charlie's father who's not got any place, and then take out the other three grandparents and just say Grandpa Joe's just kind of like the guy, you know.
yeah.
Just,
I mean, you could have done that, and nothing, literally nothing, would have changed in the plot.
exactly.
I mean, you could have kept the same thing in which Grandpa Joe was really sick and laying in bed, and, Charlie didn't have a dad, and the mother is the only one caring for the family. And literally nothing would have changed. Anyway, but here in this movie, as well as in the book, it's justified on where their current condition is. Charlie's father is the only one who's providing work for the family. He was working at a toothpaste factory of all things, while the mom is staying home and taking care of her parents and, her husband's parents, as well as their own son. So that's a reason on, why they're in the situation where they're at. So then we have the usual plot about like the competition is going on and everybody around the world is trying to search for the candy, the 5 golden tickets and the chocolates and all that kind of stuff. And the good thing about this is that there is no filler that is pointless in this movie. There's no subplot about like, oh, the president of the United States is looking for the candy, or any stupid pointless scene with like the therapist asking his client about like, oh, you had this dream about the candy, tell me, or the whole dumb hostage situation. No, immediately it goes over from it being announced to the crazy, crowds that is being gathered with everybody buying chocolate from all over the world. And then the winners, one by one, are being announced. So we have obviously the usual contenders. We have Augustus Gloop, Veruca Salt, Mike TV, Violet Beauregard, and then obviously, the 5th person, which actually was done correctly about the woman from Russia. Although, again, they mentioned it last as opposed to they mentioned it second in the movie and then it being an afterthought. But hey, it's a massive improvement of what we got before.
So, I mean, in regards to all the characters improvement, so to say, I'm really glad that they decided to keep the White House out of this movie because, it's like, having Donald Trump in Home Alone 2 isn't that bad enough. And also, just in regards to the kids that did end up getting the tickets, obviously they've been modernized, and I think they've probably been modernized in a good way. So instead of having Mike TV obviously be someone who's totally and utterly obsessed with TV, obviously he's like a video game fanatic. And,
yeah, like his portrayal. Exactly. Yeah. His portrayal in the book, as well as in the 1971 film, was pretty dated by 2005. Like, no kid is going to be obsessed with watching cowboy movies or TV shows anymore. So,
well, they could have made him like, kind of like, oh, I watch all the violent action movies and stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense, but not cowboy westerns, because it was pretty much out of style in 2005.
Yeah, just like, Clint Eastwood was a long time ago,
Yeah, exactly. And this would be years before, Red Dead Redemption and other, westerns would probably, got people like caring for westerns again in the mainstream.
Well, even then, like, mind you, I'm pretty glad they didn't go with the cowboy thing. Couldn't you imagine them doing a tie-in with Red Dead Redemption if they did that? Like,
oh my God.
I keep that away.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people will probably not know even what Red Dead Redemption is. Kind of like, it would stick out like a sore thumb, kind of like when they were. When Stone Cold Steve Austin was playing Halo 2 in that movie starring Adam Sandler, what's it called? The Longest Yard.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Anyway, but yeah, so they updated Mike TV for him from being like an obsessed, kid who watched television all the time to him playing video games. And his parents are just as clueless as they ever been, where they allow their kid, they allow Mike to just play games and, basically have the TV be its babysitter. And the Veruca Salt was, this pretty much the same thing as both the book and in the original movie, in which, Mr. Salt owns a peanut factory, and he was like telling his workers, if you find the golden ticket, I'll give you this or something. And the thing that we didn't see is that like the coworker who found it was almost about to hide it until Mr. Salt came by and took the ticket from her and then gave it to Veruca, and then she's like, now I want a pony. Which, here's the thing, like, we loved, Veruca in the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And, like, the original actress who played her did a phenomenal job. And here in this movie, Julia Winter as Veruca, she did a pretty decent job as well, playing as the snooty, spoiled brat.
Here's the thing about this, and I know I've been very brutally, critical of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory up until now, but dare I say, I probably prefer the older Veruca from the 1970s movie to this movie.
I do agree as well. The original actress did a much better job.
Well, it's not just that. It's just like, didn't you feel there was more of a, even though we knew that Veruca Salt is supposed to be this greedy, girl who wants everything in the world, didn't you feel that there was more of a sense of fun with the original Veruca Salt than you have with this one? This one just kind of like feels like a swarmy bad guy who you just can't root for at all in any particular way, and in a way it just kind of felt uncomfortable. I mean, obviously she was going to get a comeuppance, but at least I don't know why, I just feel like it works better in the old movie than it does in this movie. Like, it's just like, I guess in a way, I guess you're kind of just expecting it. I think because she looks so antagonistic as somebody who, keep in mind, she has a pretty frosty relationship with Willy Wonka in this movie. And but I mean, I would say there's probably more of a connection between Willy Wonka and Veruca Salt in the original movie. And so I think, in a way, it kind of makes you feel like there's more of an expectation that there's going to be like an ultimate comeuppance for Veruca Salt in this way. And so I guess it kind of makes her performance in this. And there's nothing against the child who played her. I mean, obviously she did the best she could, and actually did a really good job in that regard. I just think of the way that she was written and the way that she was portrayed by the writer, I think by the direction, I just feel like it was not as enjoyable as the old one, unfortunately.
Fair enough. I mean, I think that her and Augustus Gloop, they are like really close to their book counterparts, which they needed tweaking to make them more modernized, which I think works really well with Mike TV and Violet Beauregard, which she got a massive upgrade. Like in the original book and in the 1971 film, the only thing that we knew about her was that she was a gum enthusiast and that she chewed the same gum over and over and over again, which she does in this movie, but also she's an overachiever. She has so much trophies and awards, and she's a martial artist, and her mom is one of those pushy moms who wants her daughter to strive to be the best that she could be. Like, it's kind of like one of those, like toddlers and tiaras, or, one of those like dance mom situations.
That's what I was going to get to, actually. I mean, did this movie come out at the same time that we got Here Comes Honey Boo Boo?
I think maybe before then.
Yeah, because like, I mean, in this movie, like the way that they put Violet together is just like, well, I guess they can say that they probably looked at the original character like just saying, oh, she's just somebody who just chews gum, and I think I agree in a way. When you're gonna put that when you put that together in a I'm trying to find the best word for it. When you put that together in a view, well, like on a screen, when you put it in a viewing format, obviously in a book format, it sounds very interesting the way that Violet is portrayed. But as a viewing spectacle, you kind of look at it and think, there could just be more to it. And so what was the best way they did it? I think they probably did it in the best way that they could, which was making her this ultra competitive, wanting to become, first in absolutely everything, and just putting her putting her character together in that sense, which I think is really good, because like it's you look at Charlie Bucket, he's very humble, he just accepts the way things have gone, and he's basically just going off on luck. While you got someone like Violet, who is working at like 120% and is being driven, and is a completely different personality to Charlie. So you can definitely, it's a good storytelling element that they put in here between characters who just look so different from one another and can clash with one another.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what are your thoughts on Charlie Bucket in this version? Because, we have Freddie Highmore as Charlie Bucket, and I just want to say thank you, God, that we are talking about a main child actor who did not quit the acting industry after they were done with the movie that they were well known for. He was already a well-known actor for years, and he's still acting. Like, yes! Finally, the chain is broken.
Do you think it was because this Charlie Bucket? I would say he is memorable, and he has a very very close relationship with Grandpa Joe in this, which I think is very good in that sense. And compared to the original movie, I would say that he does fit the bill. I think a lot further along than I'd say our other Willy Wonka in that regard. You give props to the character in the original movie. Like he does portray Charlie's like innocence and does portray his childlike qualities in a very good light. But I have to agree. I think the Tim Burton version, I think of how innocent he makes him, and the interaction that he has with everyone on the screen, I think is a lot more. I think is a lot more believable than the kind of like the more fanciful version that we got in the Gene Wilder version.
I'm pretty mixed with this personally. I mean, Peter Ostrom as Charlie in the original was done really well because he acted like a real kid. And Freddie Highmore as Charlie, he does act like a real kid as well, but there are some times in which I feel he was like a little too perfect.
I feel like he's a bit more of an adult in this version than the other one.
Yeah, it is true. He does seem like he has to be an adult with responsibilities. It's like he understands the sacrifices that his parents have to make in order for him to survive. Like, he shares his candy in his birthday because, they don't, he gets this candy once a year. So he's like, I have to share this with everyone. I mean, the fact that he's from a poor family, he has to, and I'm sure that he is, understanding that his family is trying their very best to support him, and he's just like not being selfish. He's not demanding that he wants things and stuff like that. So I can understand that he's a lot more mature as opposed to like somebody like Violet, Veruca Salt, who was raised rich, and she when she demands and when she yells, she gets anything she wants. So again, a great contrast with Violet Beauregard and Charlie Bucket, as mentioned earlier. There's also a good contrast with Veruca Salt and Charlie Bucket in that sense when it comes to class.
Mm-hmm. And I guess you can. Here's the thing about this, though. I think Veruca Salt, I think various other kids in there. I think they are very well explained in the why they are who they are, because obviously they're influenced by their parents in this. And I don't know, like I get a feeling that wasn't all that well explained. I think in the Gene Wilder version. I think the parents were kind of just there, really. Like, with the exception of Mr. Salt, who you can obviously tell has an influential. Actually, tell you what, actually, think about Mr. Salt in the original movie. It was like he was kind of being more kicked around by his daughter rather than actually kind of like influencing his daughter. So maybe I would say that in regards to. I think there's a focus, I think, on the direction of the characters with these kids, was more the fact that they are created the way that their parents were, rather than having Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory. You kind of have the kids kind of like running the show, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So. I can see that. Anyway, so continuing on with the story, so, we have, Charlie's father getting fired, and now they're struggling even more than ever to, provide for the family. They, as mentioned in the book, half of their rations are being cut, and, they get less food. And although, in the book, it was described that Charlie got so skinny that he looked like a skeleton, which doesn't happen. But, the same beats apply with...
well, you couldn't really do that, could you? I mean, like...
Yeah, that's true. Child labor laws, yeah, I know.
Not that. It's just, they could have CGI'd it in. I think they probably could have done that. But, I wouldn't put it past Tim Burton to put that as a suggestion. But, I think somewhere down the line, you kind of have to pull back from, like, the absurdness and kind of, like, say, well, look, you need to have, even if they did do it, I mean, like, how much budget would they have had to even put down a designer to say, okay, well, we want to put the kid who's playing Charlie Bucket in, like, a green suit and, like, then put, like, a body, like, of a really thin child, like, over him, and we want to do that for, like, the majority of the movie. Like, you can probably imagine how much that would have probably cost to do. So I think the idea of just having it like, oh, well, Charlie Bucket's just going to look like a normal kid, I think, and that would make him far more relatable and obviously not, break the bank. I think it makes more sense to have him in proper proportions rather than have him as like, some kind of like CGI skeleton,
Mm-hmm. Right. Anyway, but we have the same beat in which when, the names of the winners are being done one by one, and Grandpa Joe has more confidence that, hey, maybe the chocolate that Charlie has for his birthday has the golden ticket in it, but it doesn't. And so then, Grandpa Joe gives Charlie some money so that he can buy another chocolate bar so that he can be able to see if that has the golden ticket in it, but it doesn't. And then we have the scene where it's snowing and it takes place around wintertime, and
I'm
Charlie
sorry
does
to pull back, but in that scene when Grandpa Joe gives him the money, in the original one it was for his tobacco. I mean, I'm trying to remember, is that still the same reason why he had that money, or is he just
No, he just
kinda
gave it.
kept
No, not at all. I mean, the whole tobacco thing wasn't even in the book in the first place.
Yeah.
He just had the money because he sees that Charlie really wants to get the to see if he can find the golden ticket, and so he just so happens to have a silver dollar with him in case of an emergency, and so he gives it to him and says, like, go buy a chocolate bar. And then when he receives it, which when we were watching the movie together, when it cuts immediately over to Charlie waking up Grandpa Joe, we're like, man, if it was airing on TV, that could have been a good commercial break. Anyway, but then when he wakes up and then they open up the chocolate together, and sadly there was no golden ticket in it. And then we cut into the scene in which when Charlie finds the money in the snow, and then he goes over and he buys the chocolate bar. And then that's when he gets the golden ticket, and everybody's like bothering him, saying, "I'll give you this amount of money for it. I'll give you this amount of money for it." And then the candy man says, "Hey, leave the boy alone. Let him keep his golden ticket." And then he tells him to run home. And then when he finally gets home and he shows the golden ticket, Grandpa Joe immediately gets out of bed and starts dancing around, which is very similar to what happened in the book. For those who
even in the book, I thought you were about to say in the original movie, but
yeah.
in the original movie, he actually made a song and dance number out of him finally getting out of bed, but no, not in this one. Yeah, he just jumps straight out and just gets it over and done with. Really, no song number, no nothing like that. Just it's all said and done.
Yeah, although I do prefer, the scene in the original when he's struggling to get out of bed, because he's been laying in a bed for 20 years. You're telling me that he would just immediately get up right away? I think I remember seeing a poll.
Well, if you remember, but here's the thing, like, if you remember, he said that he had money for when he wanted to go out and get his tobacco. So at some point, he must have left his bed. It was kind of a continuity error in the original one.
That's true.
So so I think in this one, it makes far more. Yeah, in the first movie, it doesn't make all that much sense. That he just suddenly jumps out of bed and starts dancing around and stuff like that. But in the second movie, when he's slowly starting to kind of build up, and it looks like he's had some kind of movement previously. I mean, like, it's a bit more. I don't know. Like, the original movie seems a bit more believable in that number, but this one, it's kind of like, oh yeah, like he must have moved around at some point, but it's just me.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. So I think I remember on the Roald Dahl Facebook or Twitter or something, they were saying about, like, who is Grandpa Joe? A supportive grandparent or a lazy good for nothing grandparent who just lays in bed all day? And a majority of the votes said lazy for good for nothing grandparent who just lays in bed all day, because I think there were some.
All of them, couldn't you?
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, so it's decided that, Grandpa Joe was going to go along with Charlie to the chocolate factory because, you have to take one guardian with you. And so we have...
I don't remember. What was the reason why the dad couldn't go?
I think the reason why is because I think Grandpa Joe offered. He's like, let me go to the chocolate factory because I have experiences with, Willy Wonka, and I wanted to see the factory one last time.
Oh, hang on a second. Actually, I remember now. In the book, it's because he obviously has to work and he has to go out and shovel snow and stuff like that. So that's the reason why he couldn't take him on that particular time. I mean, like, but in this movie, he's unemployed still. So unless he's finding time to do odd jobs, I don't know. But I mean, like, I'm just really surprised that the dad didn't offer to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. The dad was off shoveling snow and the mom had to stay home to take care of the rest of the grandparents. So, yeah, I could understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the interesting things that I noticed when watching this movie is that the parents who went with the other children were swapped. Now, Augustus went with his mom, just like in the original 1971 film. But when it came to the parents of Mike TV, was swapped. In the original 1971 movie, Mike's mother went with him. But in this version, as well as in the book, his father went with him. And I think that, if I remember, Mr. Beauregard was the one who went with Violet in the original 1971 movie, while in this one, as well as in the book, the mother went along. So they swapped parents.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I mean, like, is anyone complaining? Like,
not really, no.
They seem to all fit to the T, and also when it came to all the problems that they all ran into the factory, they all naturally, did what they needed to do. So, I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, so, and to be honest with you, though, I mean, it wouldn't really have mattered what parent they would have brought in, I think, in regard. I mean, with the exception of Mr. Salt. I mean, obviously, he had to bring in Mr. Salt into the factory because basically that's, he's that's basically how it always plays out. But I mean, like, I think the other parents, I think, in this movie could have been interchangeable.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they left pretty much no impact on the original anyway, with the exception of obviously Grandpa Joe and Mr. Salt. So nothing worth. It was not much of a big loss. So yeah. So finally they get, the news press is surrounding everybody, and they're wondering about, like, oh, Mr. Wonka is going to be coming out to the factory for the first time in a very long time. And instead of in the original movie, in which, we have, Willy Wonka, like, limping towards everybody and then surprising them, instead we have, like, this animatronic, singing, jingle where, you have the Willy Wonka song and everybody's, like, looking at it confusingly. It looks like it's ripped off straight out of Disney World.
Yeah, it's kind of weird though, because it's like, if you remember, like, there was a big, massive crowd outside of the gate, and then if you like, they're still, like, within, eye shot, I would have thought, of the crowd outside. So, when they get to the point where the whole, like, Disney Worldy thing kind of burns down and starts, smashing up and everything like that, and all that kind of stuff, and then the throne comes out and he's not there, and then all of a sudden you just see, like a click, he just kind of turns up next to them. Like, I'm really surprised, like, nobody would have, like, reacted to the fact that he was, like, walking up to them and standing right next to them. I would have thought, unless they were just as shocked as everybody else was. I have no idea.
I don't know either, but yeah. Then we get into Johnny Depp as Willy Wonka, and oh my gosh, where do we begin?
Okay, well, can we dismiss something right out of the bat?
Please.
I do not believe his performance is based on Michael Jackson.
It's not.
I'm sorry.
It's not.
Let's kill that right off the bat, because I know we're going to get comments about that.
Oh, yes. Let's mention that pretty much most of the critics who saw this movie when it first came out was all about comparing, Johnny Depp's performance as Willy Wonka, with Willy Wonka as Michael Jackson, was hugely stated, even though it's not. And we already know why, because as you know, during the, early to mid 2000s was when the, Michael Jackson allegations started happening. I'm sure you remember about, like, oh, he dangled his baby on the balcony and stuff like that. And then there was, that Michael
Jackson. Oh, really? I thought it was, when about did he pass away?
He passed away in 2009.
And this movie was in 2005, did you say it was? Right. Yes. Oh, wow. So it was like 3 years before he passed away. So, yeah, I guess, it was in the height of all of that, wasn't it? So,
yes, it was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you remember, like, that whole, allegation about, like, oh, man, he's dangling his son off the balcony. Oh, he's covering his kids with masks. What's wrong with him? And
yeah, he doesn't do that in the movie. Like, it's I heard thing as well. Like, as far as I'm aware, in the original book, Willy Wonka didn't have. Willy Wonka's dad was not a thing.
No, it's not. In fact, this is one of the very, very, very few changes that was put in to this movie about, like, Willy Wonka and his relationship with his father, which, come on, this is Tim Burton. Don't be surprised that he put this into the movie, because he's done this. I mean, this has pretty much been well documented that Tim Burton didn't have a really good relationship with his father, that he thought of him as, like, really weird, and they didn't get along with anything. I mean, this is apparent if you see Big Fish, which came out a few years before, that, it's the story about a man who has a really strained relationship with his father. And the same thing happened with, a few of his other movies as well. So the fact that, there was an additional scene with Willy Wonka's backstory, and he has a strained relationship with his father, who is a dentist, and Willy Wonka loves chocolate more than anything. I mean, it's Tim Burton. I'm not too surprised that this is there.
Yeah, I just I kind of look at things. Did Christopher Lee need a payday? Was Star Wars not paying him enough?
I don't know.
It was just really when someone who is a fan of the book and someone who is somewhat an admirer of the original movie, I just felt like this was a bit unnecessary, really. Like, we couldn't develop any other aspects of the story than having to say, oh, hey, Willy Wonka had a really strained relationship with his dad. It could have saved all that Michael Jackson BS, if they'd not bothered to put that in. I mean, I'm not saying that Christopher Lee didn't put on a good performance in that. I mean, obviously he, as the cold, cruel father of Willy Wonka, I think that obviously was a big thing. But, I mean, to write Willy Wonka's origin story, I mean, is a pretty ballsy thing to do, I think, for someone who is trying to stay close to, the original source material as humanly possible,
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty unnecessary, in my opinion. It literally did not need to be there. So, yeah, I don't really have too much to say about that. So let's just move on. So, Willy Wonka brings everybody into his factory, and the kids are asking him questions, and he clearly does not care about what the kids have to say, and he's just acting way too hard to be cool. I mean, this is one of those how do you do fellow kids moments, in which he just tries his very best to be as cool to these kids as possible, and it just falls flat on its face.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell he's been a massive recluse for a good long while. He just seems to have this massive struggle with human interactivity in this, and which is a bit of a shame, really, because in a way it makes Gene Wilder's performance look a little bit better than this. Because, which Willy Wonka would you rather hang out with, the Johnny Depp version or the Gene Wilder version?
Obviously, the Gene Wilder version.
Yeah, exactly. Apparently the Willy Wonka movie is apparently the one that many hardcore Roald Dahl fans and Roald Dahl himself actually disliked. But I mean, I would really want to take back. I was not aware the original Willy Wonka in the book even wasn't this hateful towards people, and this not much of a not a sociopath, but not much of a someone who's abstracted from reality as this Willy Wonka is portrayed in this. So yeah, it's really just unnerving, and it makes you wonder. Obviously Charlie Bucket is the main protagonist in all of this, but it makes you wonder. Was Willy Wonka going to go through some kind of really awkward turn, and all of a sudden Charlie Bucket was going to have to fight a massive chocolate monster or something like that against Willy Wonka and win the factory over some bullshit like that.
Yeah, I think the reason why they decided to change the direction here for Willy Wonka is because Tim Burton didn't like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And let's admit it, Gene Wilder was hands down the best actor in that movie, and he was the best character in that movie. So much so that it actually is a huge detriment for everybody else, because Gene Wilder steals the show in every single regard. Now, don't get me wrong, people such as, Peter Ostrom and Jack Albertson and the rest of the people did a really good job as well. But they cannot hold a candle to the performance that Gene Wilder put into that movie. I mean, he put his entirety into that movie, and so much so that the other characters suffered. So maybe they were thinking, we need to dedicate to the other characters because it's called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, it's not called Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And we already know why there was a name change. We discussed about this last time, that there was some controversies involving with the term Charlie, but not anymore. It's not the 1960s anymore, and so we need to focus on Charlie, not Willy Wonka.
Yeah, and the thing is that though is it was one of the things I wanted to kind of bring in with this whole with the whole Willy Wonka thing is that, I mean, if you look at Gene Wilder, like when you usually interacting with the parents when they're asking like all sorts of like legitimate questions, like he'll come back with like saying like, oh, a bit of nonsense now and then will be cherished by the wildest man, or any questions please will be after the tour or will be put into writing. Like some of those quirky comebacks, that he would come up with in this, and Johnny Depp just I was expecting to have like some kind of like snarky comeback to something like that, but he didn't. He just kind of looked like this awkward guy that you just felt like you just didn't really enjoy being in front of. And like he's supposed to be like one of the main characters of the movie. It's what are you guys doing?
Johnny Depp just looks incredibly lost in the role. Like, he's trying to struggle to find an identity with Willy Wonka. And here, it just doesn't really work. There's a reason why Gene Wilder has been the definitive Willy Wonka for pop culture in the past 50 years, because people remember him so fondly.
It's because he's lovable. Like, Gene Wilder, Willy Wonka, is a lovable guy. Like, he's a guy you want to spend time with. He's interesting. Like, he also looks like he's some kind of, genius as well, because he's obviously spoken with his Oompa Loompas and things like that. Actually, that's another thing as well. Like, why is Willy Wonka in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory such a problem to interact with when he's had all these Oompa Loompas that he could have interacted with in the factory? I mean, do they not share the same kind of like human interaction or anything like that? I mean, they look kind of human, and when you look at these Oompa Loompas, I mean...
Exactly. Like, there is no excuse, because if you remember from the Oompa Loompas in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, they weren't really human-like at all. They looked like the Munchkins from The Wizard of Oz. But no, I mean, in this movie, they look human-like, very small human-like, but human-like nonetheless. And, we'll get to the Oompa Loompas in just a moment. But yeah, like, very similar, it's kind of like the complete opposite, in which, like, Willy Wonka in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was the best in the movie. But sadly, Willy Wonka and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was the worst in the movie. I'm sorry.
I know.
Anyway, so they walk around and they see the factory, and it looks pretty normal, like a typical factory. And then we have like, Charlie interacting with the kids. It's like, oh man, the kids are interacting with each other, which had never happened in the original. And, we have like, Augustus offering Charlie a chocolate bar, and he's like, hey, do you want a chocolate bar? And he's like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And he's like, go get your own. And he's like eating it. And then we have Violet and, Veruca saying like, oh, let's be friends, best friends. And then they like cross each other's fingers in the back. It's like, yeah, they're actually talking with each other, because I mean, if you won a contest, there's going to be a chance that you're going to be interacting with the contest winners. I mean, it makes sense that Mike TV's not speaking to anybody, because, he's a socially awkward kid.
Social outcast, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's one thing that I hate the interaction that Augustus Gloop had with Charlie. Like, it'd be like, I mean, wouldn't you think that he would be kind of like? I think the better way I would have played it with Augustus Gloop and Charlie Bucket is that Augustus Gloop only has ever known anything about like eating umpteen amounts of things. So he probably would be like talking about it with Charlie and not actually realizing that Charlie's actually really poor and can't afford anything except cabbage soup. So, like, I would have had, like, that disconnect as a conversation between the two. But
yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, as mentioned before with, like, all of these Roald Dahl adaptations, Roald Dahl seems to depict fat people into two different categories. They're either the Augustus Gloop clone or the bully or antagonist. That's pretty much it. At this point in time, the fat kid cliche was already done to death, and we already had better depictions of overweight people, as mentioned before with like Harold Berman from Hey Arnold and Mikey from Recess. Like, because that Tim Burton was sticking very close to the book, this trope was still presented as the typical trope in the book, and from the book to the movie. And they did pretty much little to no changes, other than he's just a fat kid who just loves eating food, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. I just think if they really wanted to go for like more interesting characters in that regard, I would not have gone that route. But he's to his own, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, so now we finally get introduced to the chocolate room, which, very similar to the original, was like the highlight for a lot of people. It's like, oh man, everything is made out of like, candies and chocolates and sweets and all that kind of stuff. And, Now, here's the thing, as we mentioned before in the original movie, that it was an actual room that was filled with an actual chocolate river, and the stuff that they ate from it was mostly real. But in this one, obviously, it was a CGI river, and they tweaked it to make it look more chocolate-like, and the stuff that they were able to eat, for the most part, was pretty real, but it was mostly done in a set that was, like, filled with pretty much nothing. But let's be honest, it looks way better than the original. Like, the chocolate looks like legit chocolate, and the food looks like you could actually eat it. Like, it looks amazing.
Yeah, but I guess this goes back to the age-old argument we have with all of these films. Like, I mean, what looks better, practical effects or CGI effects? And what do you think looks more believable?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, let's be honest. I mean, that chocolate river does not hold up whatsoever. I mean, even Gene Siskel pointed it out in his original review that it looked more like the Chicago River. And yeah, it just looks, yeah. I mean, for those who don't know, the Chicago River once upon a time was heavily polluted. So, yeah. Anyway, but
I'm British, and even I know that.
Exactly. So yeah, the effect, let's be honest. I mean, when it comes to like the effects in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, pretty much everyone have said that that's probably one of the major weak links of the film, that it just doesn't hold up. It hasn't aged very well. And the fact that it was like in a really low budget, is like they only could do what they could with the limited amount of resources. But here, with $150 million and with Tim Burton and the technology that we have back in 2005, it's like they were able to do things that the original movie couldn't even dream of doing. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, like, the argument about practical effects versus CGI, I mean, I'm one of those people who sees a benefit in both. Like, I've seen movies that were done both practically and with CGI and have done really well. It looks really, really good. I mean, Jurassic Park is one of those prime examples about, like, they were able to use a combination of animatronics and CGI, and it looks amazing even still to this day. I know that people are like complaining about, like, oh, there's too much CGI this and too much CGI that. It's like, yeah, I understand, CGI is able to cut back on producing things that take a lot of time. I understand that, but I think that CGI, if done sparingly, can look really, really good, and it can be very beneficial for either a movie or a TV show or whatever. So yeah, I'm not one of those CGI haters. I'm not, far from it. But I do love practical effects. I mean, I do enjoy puppetry. I do enjoy stop motion. I enjoy, like animatronics. I enjoy all those things too. But I think that the stuff that they did here in this movie, especially with the chocolate room and all the other stuff that they have, I think it was done really, really well. Yeah, so it plays off beat for beat like in the original, in which like all the kids are like, going around and eating all the chocolates and the candies, and Mike TV is destroying everything because, he says, oh, I get, he said, have at it, have fun. And so he just destroys things like a crazy maniac. And we have Augustus Gloop, dipping into the chocolate river like he did in the original, and then he gets himself, stuck into, the chute where, the chocolate was being transferred over to the fudge room. And so this is where we get introduced to the Oompa Loompas, played by Deep Roy. And the Oompa Loompas are singing songs that are directly from the book written by Roald Dahl himself. And one of the things that I did enjoy about the music in this movie was that they were able to play off different genres of music, from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s. So I thought that was done pretty well, and it gives it a unique flavor to, the classic Oompa Loompa song, which they sing a total of 5 different times.
Yeah. On top of that as well, like the music is so creative in this, because at one point it's 50s, the next thing it's 60s, and then it goes all the way up into basically, the 80s, and like it takes advantage of like the full genres of music that have existed in pretty much in the last couple of decades. And I just feel like you get far more variation in this movie than you did in the other movie. And like I thought that as well, like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory had a lot of throwaway music numbers, if you really think about it. Like the one saying "Don't Cry, Charlie" as he's walking home, like she's just like singing like as he's walking down the street. Like I don't think he could hear most of it, I think, by the time he got home. But
and this is not just us talking. Even the director himself thinks that song is completely pointless.
But all the songs in this movie, because they're from the book and because they've had a good creative twist on them, and they've basically been brought into into a better orchestral light, you can obviously appreciate them a lot more than you can do in the original movie.
Which is kind of sad, because when this movie came out, critics praised the music, but nowadays it's pretty much forgotten. It's a huge reversal from what happened in the original movie, in which the critics, called the music instantly forgettable, and then it was nominated for an Oscar for Best Soundtrack, and now pretty much everybody knows the music. The Candyman, I Got a Golden Ticket, Pure Imagination, I Want It Now. Everybody knows these songs, but nobody knows the songs from the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
You know why that is because these song numbers have been going on for decades. I mean, like, how old is Charlie and the Chocolate? Or 15 years old at this point?
Oh, yeah, just about.
Yeah, I mean, like, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory has been around for decades. I think, we won't be remembering Charlie and the Chocolate Factory songs until they start, becoming into, start becoming more into our, here's the thing about this. Repetition is key. The more you repeat something, the more people are going to remember it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, even, it still has television airings to this day. I mean, Aaron and I, we watched this movie last Thanksgiving.
Yeah, exactly. And so, this, so Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, of course, the songs are going to keep getting remembered time and time and time again, because they've grown up with our grandparents, they've grown up with our parents, and they've grown up with us, and then they'll probably grow up with our children in the future. So, they'll have more chance to be remembered. But Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I think, is going to have to be around, I think, for a good couple of decades before people start saying, oh, hey, this song and that song and that song,
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, so yeah, continuing on, we have, Augustus Gloop is no longer in the group, and so then we go over to the next bit, which is, everybody going into the boat, and then we have the tunnel scene, which, of course, as mentioned before, in the original book, there were no like creepy images, and there were no like somberness whatsoever. But no, in this one, it's just like, the Oompa Loompas are playing a drum. Although the one thing I do like is that they were able to keep this little thing from the book, is that Willy Wonka grabs a ladle and he spoons some of the chocolate from the chocolate river and offers it to Charlie because he notices how skinny he looks, which is from the book. And it does give a nice little preview of the relationship between Willy Wonka and Charlie that would happen later on. And so, yeah, the tunnel scene is pretty quick. It just goes in and out so fast. And people are like, oh, that's it? Well, you have to remember that, once again, there's little to no filler. It just goes from the tunnel all the way up until they reach over to like the little callbacks with like the coffee cream and the hair cream. And then finally, when they reach over to the secret room where the candy is being built, and then we finally go over to when, Violet Beauregard chews on the piece of gum, and then we see her turn into a blueberry. There's no cutbacks with like, them going into like the car where the foam is being sprayed.
But here's the thing about this, Patricia. I mean, like, just go back to the the fact that the tunnel scene just kind of just goes by. I mean, like, could you imagine? Would you want Tim Burton to do the tunnel scene from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? Honestly, like, I mean,
oh man,
could you imagine
that would be pure nightmare fuel.
Even Rob Zombie would look at that and thinking, "Oh, that keeps me up at night." Like yeah. There's just some things just shouldn't exist in this world, and that probably Tim Burton recreating the tunnel scene is probably not one of them. So I think we should all be quite grateful that just kind of came and went, really.
Yeah, true. I mean, oh man, I could imagine. Anyway, so yeah, we have, very similar to the original, Violet Beauregard, gets the experimental gum and starts chewing on it. And then we have, her slowly turning into a blueberry, which we go into our next song from the Oompa Loompas, chewing all day long. It's very played off like a disco song. And so, they roll her into the juicing section of the chocolate factory where, they squeeze the blueberry part of out of her. And then we get an interesting backstory about the Oompa Loompas themselves, about, how, Willy Wonka was trying to search for like some sort of, ingredients out in the, in the countryside in Loompa Land, as it was called. And then, he was fighting off the Vermicious Knits, which were like these giant, creatures or something like that. And then he meets up with the Oompa Loompas themselves, which live up in trees and which is a callback to the fact that if you remember from the original book, the Oompa Loompas were African pygmies. So because we didn't want to go, too politically incorrect, they decided to, tweak it up a little bit so that it won't be too offensive.
Yeah, I mean, that would be how cool of a movie would that be if they decided, or even like like a mini series like on Netflix or something like that. Like they went into the origins of when Willy Wonka discovered the Oompa Loompas.
Well, I mean, your wish is granted, Aaron, because if you remember that there was an announcement not too long ago that Taika Waititi is going to be working on 2 animated series based off of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, one of which is going to be about the Oompa Loompas.
So yeah, well, that sounds really cool. So if that's the case, then yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So
yeah,
I hope they make it action packed, or at least they try and go in that direction. I think that'd be a really cool thing to do.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, speaking of Taika Waititi, shout outs to him for, doing a weekly reading of James and the Giant Peach alongside with his celebrity friends for charity. So if any of you guys are interested in donating for charity for COVID-19, then go check out the Roald Dahl YouTube channel where you can donate to the cause.
Oh yeah, definitely do that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was just thinking about that. Like, I mean, how interesting would it be? Like, they say, it starts off with like these bunch of explorers. Like, say, oh, why are we doing this job? Like, it's just some weird bloke called Willy Wonka. What the hell's his deal? Like, it's the explorers kind of like probing Willy Wonka as they're walking through this jungle, like saying like, what's this about? Like, and they just have this kind of like just adventure. I think that's a really good premise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so we have that little backstory, and then we get flashbacks in between the trip to the chocolate factory of Willy Wonka's backstory, where he tries chocolate for the first time, and then he starts getting obsessed with candy, and he starts jotting down notes, and then when his father finds out about it, he is like really upset, and he wants him to take over the family business of being a dentist, and Willy Wonka's like, no, I'm just gonna run away from here. That one little scene in which like he's walking across all the flags and then it ends up being in a museum was actually pretty funny.
Yeah, it's like, and on top of that as well, like when he kind of goes back, he finds out the whole house has just disappeared, which is kind of like, how on earth did in that small time frame he managed to like uproot the entire house and move it somewhere else?
Tim Burton.
Yeah. Yeah, Tim Burton, of course. It was man, that was actually done in flashback. So for all I know, that could be just kind of like how, well, mind you, that house ends up turning up like like on a cliffside, like later on in the movie. So like, I guess I would kind of like put it down to like, oh, this is just how Willy Wonka observes it in his head, if you know what I mean. But
yeah.
The fact that I think that's. Yeah, I think they should have just kept it at that, and kind of like then all of a sudden like they just find out that oh no, his house hasn't just completely disappeared off the street, like he just moved down the road or something like that,
Maybe that could have been a possibility. Yeah. Anyway, but so then the next thing that we have is the thing that was originally supposed to be in the 1971 film, but because obviously due to budget constraints and the fact that they couldn't train that many animals, they decided to go with the golden geese instead. But in the book, if you remember, there were a bunch of squirrels that were testing out all the nuts, and they had like a section, they had like a dedicated nut room. So all the squirrels would be like pounding the nuts, and then the good nuts would be carried over while the bad nuts would be going down a garbage chute. And so, Veruca Salt decides, oh, I want to have one of those squirrels as a pet. And so she finds one, and then she's surrounded by a whole bunch of squirrels. They test her head out to see if she was a good nut or a bad nut, and then they throw her down the garbage chute.
So, and there's all that as well. Like once again, it's the Oompa Loompas who actually take take this tune for this, and it's like I don't know. You're gonna miss Veruca Salt having a number in this one.
I do. I wish that I would have seen the "I Want It Now" song, or at least like a similar song to it. Yes, I wish that there would have been like a section where she was like surrounded by all these squirrels and she was singing about like, I want all these squirrels. I want everything. Yeah, I do kind of miss that.
Yeah. And it's so, but mind you, the Oompa Loompas do a good job in this one. So I guess you can't fault them saying, "Oh, hey, we're gonna take this one."
Fair enough. Anyway, so yeah, so the dad decides to chase after them, even though that I do find it kind of weird. It's like you can clearly see that Veruca jumped over the small little door leading up to it, and then Willy Wonka was like struggling to find the key so that he can open the door when they could have just jumped over themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, like this is another thing as well. You're going to notice in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory compared to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, just the continuity errors and like just the way the whole presentation goes about. There's a lot of seamlessness that could be left to be desired, really. Like it just feels a bit like why can't you do X, Y, and Z? Why can't this be explained? Why can't that be explained? You know, like why can't you just do this? Why can't you just do that? Like that's the one massive critique. Even though like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is one of the my favorites, Willy Wonka movies compared to the other one. I do have to concede with the people who love the original movie that there's more, there's a lot more the things in the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie doesn't make as much sense as in the original one.
Yeah, that's true. That seems to be an issue with a lot of these Roald Dahl adaptations, is that there's so many moments that leave a lot to be desired. Like, they could have been done so much better had they gotten a rewrite, or not, sticking so close to the original source material, because some of the stuff in the source material is pretty dated or is pretty illogical. I mean, there's a reason why, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, James and the Giant Peach, and Fantastic Mr. Fox are looked very fondly. They do take a lot of creative liberties, and some of them don't even stick close to the book. But the spirit of the book is there, and some of the changes are kind of necessary because we feel the spirit of Roald Dahl, and because there were like little tweaks to make it more modernized or to make it more seamless and more in sense. Then that's why we love them so much.
Yeah, I just really wish that there was a little bit more, tweaking. I think with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but there's budget, there's deadlines to be made and there's budgets to be adhered to, so I guess you can't really complain too much, I guess.
Yeah, and also the every single change and rewriting has to be approved by the Dahl family. If they don't like it, they will deny it.
Mm-hmm.
Right after that, then we have the last scenes in the movie where we have Willy Wonka, Charlie, Mike TV, and their parent, their guardians going over to the Great Glass Elevator, and they start looking around, and they go over to various parts of the room, like there's like the mountain, and there's the exploding candy, which I gotten wrong, by the way. There was actually exploding candy in the original, so sorry.
Well, there was mention of it in the original book. I mean, yeah, there was exploding sweets for you in the original movie, but in the actual original book, it was more just kind of like a passing reference, more that it was actually a thing that actually existed in the movie.
Right. So yeah, I stated that wrong, so I apologize. So they go into the TV room, and we see like all of the Oompa Loompas like working on the transferring the chocolate bar into the television, just like in the original book as well as the original film. And Mike TV wants to try it out, and so he ends up disappearing into the molecules, and he ends up being really small, which I do really like this montage, where he's like flipping over to the different TV channels. He's in like a cooking show, he's in the newsroom, he's in the middle of a fight with like the Rock'em Sock'em robot, and then there's like this huge rock number with the Oompa Loompas. So yeah, I would say that out of all of the songs that are sung in it, this is my favorite one.
Mm-hmm. And it gives me that. And mind you, this is like in the original movie as well, in regards to the new movie. But by the time you get to Mike TV, you just kind of like start to get the feeling of like, yeah, all these kids are stupid. Like
I wouldn't say stupid. I would just say that they were rash. They were really impatient. They were self-entitled, spoiled brats, which of course, if we've known throughout this entire retrospective so far, these characters are around pretty much all the time. I mean, it's no question. But yeah, I mean, like there's always has to be the case in which like, the good and evil, like all of these kids are behaving bad, so they get repercussions, and the kid who behaves good gets all the rewards at the end. So, I mean, that's typical Roald Dahl, to be sure. Anyway, but yeah, and in the original, if you remember, he was like shrunk down, and there was like his mother put him into his purse, and then that was pretty much it. And then there was like talks about him in the taffy room, and then they were going to stretch him out. But in the movie, he went through this montage, and then, there was talks about like, oh, put me back in. And, it's like, I can't do that. Why don't we just put you into the taffy room and let's stretch you out? And so finally, by process of elimination, Charlie was the one who won the contest. And the one thing that I do appreciate is that we, unlike in the original movie where we don't get to see what happened to the kids, in both the book and in the 2005 movie, we actually do get to see the outcomes. We have, Augustus Gloop being covered in chocolate. We have Violet Beauregard being completely blue. Veruca Salt is covered in garbage. And Mike TV is stretched out so tall and so thin. With Violet and with Mike TV, they're going to get the worst of them all, because they will permanently be that way for the rest of their lives, as opposed to like Augustus and with Veruca, all they need is a shower and maybe like 6 months worth of therapy.
Mm-hmm. Well, mind you, like, if you think about it, like, probably, Veruca did finally get her massive comeuppance where, like, she's demanding stuff and, like, her dad's now saying no and stuff like that. So, like, it's like that kind of the relationship has definitely taken a turn after their visit to the factory. Also, in regards to our other characters, obviously, yeah, they're kind of bent towards, beyond recognition and stuff like that. But I'm interested to see how, keep in mind, like, the crowd of people are still outside. So, like, they've been outside this entire time, and they're looking at these people. We'll be interested to see, like, some crowd reactions of, like, oh my God, what happens to these people?
Yeah, like, I would have really liked to have seen a scene in which maybe they were being interviewed and they were asked a bunch of questions. And I'm also curious about, like, how long were they in this factory for? Like an hour, 2 hours? Like, I mean, the crowd is still there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, you would think that would be the end, right? It's like, Charlie wins the factory and, Willy Wonka grants him that and they live happily ever after. And that would be the end of the book. But no, there's actually still more to come because, when
they put this stuff in, and to be honest, it's just again, it kind of feels like it just fills out the end of the movie. Like like, yeah, we got to the end of it, like where Charlie's won the factory. That should be it, But then they decide to kind of like stretch out this thing of like, oh no, you can't invite all your family in here. You have to basically have this place on your own. So Charlie obviously picks his family over Willy Wonka, which obviously was going to happen. And then, but here's the thing about this: like, I knew from the get-go, like, oh, they're not going to end like this. Like, we all know what the end of the book is, and if he's being faithful to the book, then we know that Charlie eventually is going to be the owner of the factory.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and here's a perfect example in why, in my opinion, the way that Charlie was written, it works, because if it was like a regular kid, he would obviously choose the factory over his family. But no, Charlie was shown throughout the movie that he cares for his family, that he's willing to sacrifice everything for them. And so when he's given the opportunity of a lifetime, it's like, oh, I'd rather, have my family over $1 million. And we've seen this before, like when, that lady offered Charlie $500 for the ticket. And then, he was about to do it. He was about to say, I'm going to go give the golden ticket to a lady who offered me $500 so that we can have food for our family. And then Grandpa Joe's like, no. Grandpa George says, no, you could always have money, but this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So the fact that he chose this, as opposed to like, getting an opportunity to own a chocolate factory completely on his own with nobody around him, that is what I think was really smartly done in this character.
So, I mean, yeah, obviously they stretch out the ending, which it just kind of feels like, it feels like Lord of the Rings Return of the King, they've got rid of the ring already. Like, there's nothing else to cover, but no, apparently Sam needs to get married to this other person, and then they need to go like on this, Gandalf and Frodo needs to go on this other thing, and like, just kind of like they stretch out the ending massively.
At least that was in the book, and this was not. Like, I mean, it's like, oh, now we need to give closure to, Willy Wonka's character, even though the whole thing was about Charlie. So
yeah, this is where the movie loses focus, I think, a little bit, because then all of a sudden it's kind of like, Willy Wonka comes crawling back to Charlie and then say, oh, why are you sure you want to take this? And then they obviously get into this conversation about, his father, and then obviously that ends up in him being in the dentist chair, and then, but it's just really, I just find it really confusing because, you would have thought Willy Wonka would have been sampling chocolates all this time, and but to somehow have perfect molars and no tooth damage whatsoever.
I have so many questions about this. First of all, when we do see, Charlie and his family, how did they get the money to have good food and they were able to get their house fixed? Where did that come from? And also,
Oh no! Keep in mind. At the end of the movie, Charlie's dad doesn't get his job back, but he actually gets a new job being the guy who repairs the machines in the.
Oh, that's right.
Factory.
Right.
So that's where the money comes from.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that's the reason why they have that. So they can get the house fixed, they can get good food and everything like that because his dad's working again.
Yeah,
so in a way, Charlie doesn't need the factory. He's got everything pretty much he needs. He's got a roof over his head. He's obviously going to have to. His dad's going to support him pretty much until obviously he needs to find a place of his own. So, in regards to him being a well-supported, structured child, he's got no problems. So he doesn't need Willy Wonka in that regard. And keep in mind, that's Charlie's trait. He just settles with what he's got. And so, I think that's more than he probably could have asked for in that regard. So in that case, he's in that position to say no to Willy Wonka, to say, I don't need this. Why would I need it?
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, if it was a case in which Charlie's father didn't get the job and they were still struggling, then maybe. But the fact that his father already has a really good job and they were able to have, good food and the house is being fixed, it's they don't need Willy Wonka anymore. But no, because Willy Wonka was such a popular character in the original 1971 film, we need to finish his backstory. And so we have him being really miserable and losing motivation to create candy again, and he's finally confronts Charlie, and it's what makes you so happy and what makes you not be depressed all the time? And he's like, my family. And then that's when he's like, okay, I'm gonna confront my father once and for all. And so he goes over to his old dentist office, and then that's when he recognizes Willy Wonka with his bicuspids, which interesting. He didn't recognize him any other way. I get it that, he left
Well, keep in mind, he's not seen him since, he was a little boy. So, if that's how he's supposed to be believed. And, on top of that as well, you can, unfortunately, in the worst of circumstances, recognize someone from their dental records. So,
fair enough, I guess so.
Let's not go further into that from that. So,
yeah, let's not, because I don't really care for this scene whatsoever. I get it. Tim Burton is all about I don't like my dad. I have a strained relationship with him. It worked great in Big Fish. It doesn't work good in in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It just doesn't.
It falls flat, doesn't it? You kind of sat there and okay, there was a little. You kind of sit there trying to justify to yourself oh yeah, there's a little bit of emotion in his dad, obviously him reuniting with his father and stuff like that. Okay, but it's just this. It just feels like it's there for not much reason really.
It's the only reason why it's there is because Willy Wonka was such a popular character and he's become a huge cultural icon that we need to give him, more screen time than, say Charlie. So yeah, I understand why they decided to give him this backstory.
Patricia, in the minds of some stupid people, apparently not only is he the genius creator of chocolate, he's also the king of pop.
Okay, final thoughts. So, in my opinion, I don't understand why this movie is so hated. I can understand for somebody who was a huge fan of the original. Me, myself, I grew up with it. But there were so many things that were done right in this movie that it deserves to be properly recognized.
Here's the thing I would say about this, Patricia. Give it several decades. I guarantee you, probably, there might be some people who will be looking back at Charlie and the Chocolate Factory the same way that people look back at Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
That's fair. Absolutely.
It needs time to mature, I would say.
Yeah, and for those who are saying that this is the worst Roald Dahl adaptation, Absolutely not. Go watch
Absolutely not. No.
go watch Breaking Point and Four Rooms and then talk to us.
There are some very unsavory Roald Dahl film materials out there, and I guarantee you, this is definitely not the worst one.
No, and if
By
you
a
think
long
this is
shot.
the worst adaptation of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, no, absolutely not. We'll get to that
Mhm.
much later on.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, I would say for those who were very hesitant on checking out this movie because you were a huge fan of the 1971 film, I would say give it a chance. I would say have an open mind on watching it and, keep this in mind that it has its good moments. It really does. It has moments that are even better than the original. But there are still some things that hold it back that make it not as good as the original. So I would say that both of them have their faults and both of them have their merits. So, you pick between which one you prefer.
I just have to say that, here's the thing about this. Like, I respect everybody who enjoys Gene Wilder's performance as Willy Wonka. I absolutely do. Would I say, though, would it be enough for me to say that the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie that we've just been through is less superior to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory of that time? I would have to say no on that. There's just I enjoy thoroughly Tim Burton's work, whether it's Batman, whether it's The Nightmare Before Christmas, whether it's Edward Scissorhands, or whether it's Beetlejuice. There's a lot there that Tim Burton does, which is very creative, very dark, and dare I say, it's probably more to Roald Dahl's liking than whatever any other Roald Dahl adaptation could do in any other people's hands. And so, unfortunately, as someone who really enjoys Tim Burton's work, as someone who enjoys the darkness of Roald Dahl's work, and as somebody who just wants a more variation in his music genre in regards to the way that the characters interact with one another, unfortunately, I have to argue with everybody, and I will argue to this day that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is far superior to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And to all the Gene Wilder fans, I apologize.
Well, I'm one of those people who likes both of them for different reasons. And I will have to say that you're absolutely right, Aaron, when it comes to what Roald Dahl would have preferred. If he would have seen this movie while he was alive, he would have loved it. He would have loved it.
Right, that's a good question about that, actually. I mean, I don't think would he have loved it? I'm not. I mean, again, he's not with us in this world, unfortunately. So we will absolutely never know. And we know his wife likes it. I mean,
Yeah.
that as far as I'm aware. But I mean, in regards to the original man himself, what he would have made of it, I will not go as far to say that he would have absolutely loved it, but I will go as far as to say that he would have preferred it over Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I definitely would have preferred it.
Okay, that's fair. All right, then. Well, that is it for this episode of the Roald Dahl Retrospective. So tune in next time as we're going to be talking about the 2009 stop-motion animated film done by Wes Anderson, Fantastic Mr. Fox.
And I'm absolutely looking forward to that.
Me too. This is something I've been really looking forward to. All right, then. So until then, we will hope to see you in the next one. So take care.
See you later, guys.